Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jnananjana-Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschatyadeshitane Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyadev cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for coming for this seminar today. So I'll start by asking all of you a question. If somebody asked you, what is the Bhagavad Gita about? What would you say? What do you think is the message of the Bhagavad Gita?
To serve Krishna.
To serve Krishna. Okay. That's to serve Krishna. Anything else?
To perform one's responsibility. That's where it started.
Sorry, to perform one's responsibilities.
Yeah, that's Swadharma, where this starts with that.
Okay, perform one's responsibility, one's Swadharma. Okay.
To abandon all varieties of religion and surrender unto Krishna with love by worshipping him and offering your obeisances and serving him.
Okay.
That was a lot. Sorry.
So you're paraphrasing 1865. Okay. Yes.
To understand the nature of the soul, God, and the material world.
Okay, that's good. Understand.
That's nice.
This is soul. That is the title of the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says soul, God, and material world. We sometimes use this word MSc, matter, spirit, and the controller of both. So Bhagavad Gita gives you MSc degree. Okay. Anything else, please?
To relinquish your identity as this limited ego and instead realize that you're spirit soul.
Okay. To realize our spirituality and give up to realize spirituality, to relinquish ego. Okay, that's good. Anything else?
To revive our lost relationship with Krishna and to love Krishna.
Okay, so it's surrender to Krishna, it's another to revive our relationship or revive our love for Krishna, you can say. Okay. Yes. So, yes. Okay.
Krishna is like available for a relationship for the soul to actually, there is an opportunity for the soul to establish a relationship on various levels with Krishna.
So we realize, basically you can say that something like, we realize Krishna's love through his availability. We realize Krishna's like a loving availability for every single person. Yes. Thank you. All these responses are very much part of the teaching of the Gita, even the conclusion of the Gita. Let's so the purpose of this teaching is twofold. This session is twofold. One is to try to understand the flow of thought of the Gita, and the other is to try to understand how, when we are practicing bhakti and when we study especially Srila Prabhupada's commentary, which can seem to be just filled with bhakti. So how the two go together? That's what So look at the flow of the Gita and look at the bhakti conclusion of the Gita and see how the two come together. So here, let's begin with the basic situation. The basic situation, the Gita has how many chapters? 18. How many verses? 700 verses, yes. Now, it starts with Arjuna not being able to decide what to do. What is his dilemma essentially? Yes, to fight or to not fight. And this dilemma arises from two contradictory or two distinct duties which are pulling him into different directions. I'll use the Sanskrit word and I'll explain what they are. There is his Kula Dharma. Kula Dharma is his dynastic duty. And then there is his Kshatriya Dharma. Kshatriya is a warrior. So he is torn between these two things. If he is a warrior, then those are opponents, those are invaders, and he has to, those are aggressors, he has to punish them. But those aggressors are also members of his dynasty. They are all a part of his extended family. So if he thinks that they are part of his family, then he should try to save them. At least he should try to avoid violence against them. So he feels torn between these two things. And as a consequence of this, if he is Kshatriya Dharma, he should fight. And as Kula Dharma, he shouldn't fight. And as a generalization of that, so fighting is a broad principle of work. You do your duties. And don't fight means renounce your duties. So the Bhagavad Gita begins with this dilemma for Arjuna. So it is not that Arjuna suddenly had an attack of cowardice and say, no, I can't fight. No. Not once in the first chapter does he mention fear of his own death. So he is afraid of doing the wrong thing because it will have serious social consequences. So this is his dilemma. Should he work or should he renounce? Now, in answering this question, at one level, Krishna has one purpose. That Krishna, there is a concept in the Bhagavad Gita that there is a higher level of reality, there is the spiritual world, then there is the material world. And Krishna has descended from this, sorry to depict Krishna in a square over here. My drawing is not good enough to draw Krishna.
It's a transcendental square.
Thank you for your transcendental vision. So, Krishna has descended as an avatar. Of course, he's avatar, but the concept of avatar comes over there. He is descended from the spiritual world to the material world. And his purpose in descending is, as he explained in the Gita, it is to establish dharma. To establish order in society. And to establish a moral and spiritual order. For that purpose, those who are disruptors of society, social order, they need to be neutralized. So the Kauravas have been given many chances to try to reform. But they had not the slightest inclination to do. Krishna himself went as a peace messenger. Right now we have a war going on in Ukraine and Russia, and neither side is ready to come to the negotiating table. But imagine the head of state of one country goes to the other country. Even when these negotiations happen, at that time, the peace negotiations are generally you have some Secretary of State, a Secretary of Defense, or maybe some lower level of official who tries to do the peace negotiations. But if the head of state directly goes, that means they are really serious about negotiation. But then, what does Duryodhan do? Duryodhan completely rejects the peace proposal. There are different ways of rejecting also. Does anyone remember what or know what he says when Duryodhan rejects the peace proposal?
is good.
I won't give even the land enough to put the tip of the needle through it. Now, what is happening with this is, sometimes say we invite somebody for a program, and now they don't want to come, so they make an excuse. Now they are making an excuse, we know that they are making an excuse, and they know that we know that they are making an excuse. But still, at least they have the politeness to make an excuse. If they say, even if I die, my dead body will never come to your program. That is not just a rejection of the invitation, that is like a kick in the face of the inviter. So Duryodhan's rejection was like that. And he just didn't want peace on even the most accommodating of terms. So, for such a person who had already tried to publicly dishonor Draupadi, for such a person, if he had been given untrammeled power, he would have wreaked havoc in society. So he had to be stopped. So from Krishna's perspective, he wanted that Duryodhana be stopped, and for that purpose, he wanted that Arjuna should fight. Now, of course, if Arjuna had chosen not to fight, Krishna could have arranged to fulfill his plan some other way. But generally, God does not act directly in this way. God acts through his representatives, and thus he lets his representatives take the credit. So Krishna wanted Arjuna to fight. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna resolves Arjuna's dilemma. So at one level, so we can look at the Gita at two levels. Gita study, many levels, but two main levels. One is at the specific level. What is happening? The battlefield is happening at Kurukshetra. The battle is going to happen at Kurukshetra. And there, Krishna and Arjuna are discussing what to do. So there is a very specific discussion. But beyond that, the Gita is also about universal themes. So the universal point of the Gita is, the specific is what to do on the battlefield. But the universal is how to decide the right thing to do, the right way to live. That is the universal question. So Arjuna does not, when Arjuna stops and says, I can't fight, when he asks, his question is very universal. In 2.7, Pruchhami tvam dharma sammudha cheta. I want to know what is dharma. He doesn't say, I want to Pruchhami tvam mama dharma. What is my duty? He doesn't even ask, should I fight? So Arjuna himself raises the discussion to a very high level. And thus, Krishna also answers the discussion from a very high level. So I will make a few conceptual points before we go into the discussion of the Gita. See, whenever we study any ancient books or any books which are spoken at a context significantly different from ours, then there is something which is often called in literature the ladder of abstraction. So, ladder of abstraction means that at the bottom of this ladder are specifics. So, okay, this person spoke this, that person spoke that person did that happened over there. And specifics may be of interest to people who are interested in that time, in those characters. So, but at the top of this are universals. So for often the specifics can be interesting, they can be even entertaining. But it's the universals that are instructive. So to give a simple example, suppose say somebody says, okay, today I'll give a talk, suppose I come and say, I'll give a talk about how the population of polar bears in the polar area is decreasing. What? Okay. What's the relevance? Then I say, okay, This is too specific. If any of you are interested in polar bears, you say that's nice. Nobody talks about this. Really. But then, if I say from that, we discuss how actually the environmental conditions are degrading so much. And that is because of the human exploitation of nature. And that arises from our lack of spiritual consciousness. So then, this lack of spiritual consciousness is like a universal principle. So at the bottom of the ladder of abstraction are specific details. At the top of the top of the ladder are universal principles. So the Kurukshetra battle, that is at the bottom of the ladder of abstraction with respect to the Bhagavad Gita. But at the top of the ladder is dharma. Dharma here doesn't mean religion, it means what is the right thing to do. So the Gita's discussion does not happen, it hardly happens at the bottom of the ladder of abstraction. If Krishna had simply wanted Arjuna to fight, many people nowadays try to, because of concerns over say religious extremism, many people try to say, lump various forms of extremism together. They say, okay, there's some religious texts which are all about violence, the Bhagavad Gita also calls for violence. Well, not really. You see, if Krishna's purpose had simply to get Arjuna to fight, then the easiest way to get someone to fight is to provoke them, to incite them, to tell them how terrible the other person is. Isn't it? So, to demonize the other person. And Krishna didn't have to demonize because other people side had already acted like demons. They had tried to dishonor Draupadi. Ordinary person and their family is insulted or something, they will get angry. Arjuna was a trained warrior, was a champion archer, and Krishna could have incited Arjuna simply by talking about the dishonoring of Draupadi. But it's remarkable that in the entire Bhagavad Gita, not once does Krishna even mention the dishonoring of Draupadi. Not once does he mention the rigged gambling match in which they were cheated of their entire kingdom. Why is there no mention? Because Krishna is not speaking at this level. Krishna is speaking at this level. Sorry. Krishna is speaking at this level. The whole focus of the Gita, it is not at all on circumstantial reasons for fighting. Circumstantial reasons for fighting, not at all. It would have been very easy for Krishna to get Arjuna to fight that way. But this is not at all the focus of Krishna in the Gita. Krishna's focus is on universal principles for living. Universal principles for living. In fact, although it is spoken on the battlefield, there are very few references even to the battlefield. Among the 700 verses, there are not more than 40 or 50 verses which actually talk about the battlefield. And most of those are in the first chapter, and then there are a few in the 11th chapter. Apart from that, the whole discussion rises far above the battlefield. It's talking about universal principles. So, now Arjuna, when he starts, he has a simple dilemma: should I fight or should I not fight? Now, there, Krishna, in one sense, he wants Arjuna to fight, but he wants to fight not that so he should take revenge, because that is the responsible thing to do. That is what is responsible not only for him to establish order in society, but to help Krishna in his mission. So, with this context, now, what is Krishna doing? As I said, Arjuna is thinking of only two options. That either I renounce or I work. There are two options. One thing that education does is that education often expands our options. Suppose if we don't know much, say we want to study engineering, suppose we are living in a small remote part of the world, and say, okay, there's this engineering college, that engineering college. I have only two options. Do you get more education? Okay, there are hundreds of colleges in the world. You can choose among them. So education often expands our options. So Krishna tells Arjuna that you don't just have two options. Actually, so this is Arjuna's conception at the start of the Gita. Now Krishna responds by telling him that actually you have far more options. Krishna says basically there are 4 options for you. There is attached work, or you can say selfish work. There is detached work. Then there is real renunciation. And then there is artificial or false renunciation. So Krishna tells Arjuna that your choices are much more. Now, intuitively based on, if you look at these 4 levels of options for Arjuna, which do you think does Krishna recommend to Arjuna? Yes? Which one does he recommend? Detached work. What about attached work? Attached work, no. What about false renunciation?
No.
Yes, certainly no. Real renunciation? Yes. So now these 2 are what he recommends. And now, again, these are in terms of conceptions. Krishna did not explain these in terms of paths. In terms of paths, Krishna says that real renunciation can be done through the path of Dhyan Yoga and through Jnana Yoga. And detached work can be done through Karma Yoga and it can be done through Bhakti Yoga. So, in one sense, these are 2 branches coming from here. So in this way, the philosophical discussion about various paths arises from Arjuna's specific situation. That Krishna is Karma Yoga, Krishna is Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga and Dhyan Yoga. So now when Krishna analyzes these, what he does in this analysis is that if you consider, say, there is a target. Sometimes the word bullseye is used, but I don't like that word. It's cruel imagery. I want to shoot the eye of a bull. So I just use the word target. So now if there's a target, now an expert archer, if somebody just hits the exact target, you would say that it's a good archer. But a really expert archer could hit not just from the side, not from the front, but maybe even from the side. And at least I'm not very good drawer, but it came out okay. So if somebody could hit the same target from different directions, that would really mean that the person is quite expert. Not just hit from one side, from the front, but from various directions. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, what Krishna is doing is, he has a particular target. That is, he wants Arjuna to act responsibly. So, act responsibly in this case means to fight. So, what Krishna does is that he analyzes from various perspectives and he analyzes various paths. So, in terms of the theoretical framework, each of those paths is different. So, he analyzes from the perspective of Karma Kanda. And he says, therefore, Arjuna, you should fight. Then Karma Kanda is basically this level. Attached work is Karma Kanda. It is basically fruitive work. So from that perspective, Krishna says, you should fight. Then Krishna analyzes from the perspective of Karma Yoga. And also, he says you should fight. Krishna analyzes from the perspective of Dhyan Yoga. There also, he uses that analysis to conclude that Arjuna should fight. Similarly, he analyzes from the perspective of Jnana Yoga. And then he also analyzes from the perspective of Bhakti Yoga. Through all these perspectives, Krishna analyzes and he arrives from the practical conclusion point of view is Arjuna should do his duty responsibly. Don't dodge your duty because it is a difficult duty. So he gets him to, so there are different reasonings, different paths being reasoned, but they all arrive at the same conclusion. Now, in this sense, the Gita does not condemn any of the paths. It acknowledges the value and validity of various paths. But it also says that which path Arjuna should follow. So the Gita is inclusive. It's inclusive over here. In the sense that whichever path Arjuna feels is right for him, the conclusion is Arjuna should follow. Let me explain this from another perspective. There is action. Now, before action, generally there is some intention. Why do we do this action? And after the action is done, there is a certain result that we get. Let's call it destination. So we just have some rhymes of shan, shan, shan. Okay, so intention, action, and destination. Now the way because Krishna talks about various paths, so some people say that, okay, the Gita says that all paths lead to the same goal. Once Srila Prabhupada was asked in America, he said, Swamiji, I don't know the verse, but I've heard that Krishna says, whatever you do, you'll come to me. And Prabhupada said, if that were true, then why did Krishna even have to speak the Gita? Isn't it? If whatever you do, you're going to come to, it almost makes actions inconsequential. And the whole point of the Gita is, Arjuna wants to decide what is the right course of action. If all paths are right, you say, then why did Arjuna even have to ask Krishna for guidance? So, the Gita is inclusive, but that does not mean that it says that all paths are good. All paths have value. We'll discuss how they have value. So we'll use this particular diagram to understand this now. In terms of the Gita's understanding, Krishna says that the action that is to be done is, specifically for Arjuna, is fighting. Is to fight. But different paths have different intentions and correspondingly they will lead to different destinations. So for example, if Arjuna acts at the level of attached work, that is karma kanda, then the result is of that is material gain. So that could be he could get a kingdom in this world, or he could go to heaven in the next world. That is the destination that he will get. If he functions at the level of detached work. Detached work can be what? Many things, but it's karma yoga. Then he will gain freedom from karmic bondage. He's working without attachment, he'll get freedom from karmic bondage. Now, interesting the way Krishna analyzes this, that even if Arjuna thinks that the path of renunciation is good, Krishna reasons and tells him that right now, that is not the right thing for you. And therefore, you act at the pre-renounce level. I'll explain that a little later. But then he says, if Arjuna devoted work, that means he practices bhakti yoga. Then there he will attain Krishna. He will attain eternal love for Krishna. Now, so in one sense, the Gita is not saying that all paths are. Whichever path you want to follow, that's fine. But different paths will be followed with different conceptions and they will lead to different destinations. So, here the Gita is inclusive, but it also says that which destination is higher, which destination is lower. For example, heaven, it says it's temporary. Freedom from karmic bondage, it is good. But it is like a person who is in jail and that person comes out of the jail. That's good. But after coming out of jail, you have to build a whole life afterwards. So that is also important. So Krishna recommends Bhakti Yoga. Let's analyze that quickly. So if this is seem a little complicated, don't worry. It will only become more complicated. I'll simplify it towards the end. So the way Krishna analyzes it is that if we consider the Gita has 18 chapters. So if we consider there is the level of Karma Yoga, then Dhyan Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Sorry. Gyan Yoga, I'll explain this. So the chapters 1 to 6 talk about Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga through Dhyan Yoga. So this is how Krishna's thought flow goes. Then after that, chapters 13 to 18 is Gyan Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. And in the middle, Krishna is talking directly about Bhakti Yoga. So, sometimes you say that first 6 chapters are about karma, the last 6 chapters are about jnana. They are, but actually there is a thought flow over there. From Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga, the first 6 chapters. And from Jnana Yoga to Bhakti Yoga is the progression in the last 6 chapters. Now, each of these points, if we discuss, we can go into technicalities and you can talk about specific verses which talk about this. But I don't want to overwhelm you with first of all concepts and then verses and references also. But if you look at it, 6.47, Krishna is very clearly stating that among all the yogis, the topmost is one who is devoted. Similarly, in the 18th chapter towards the end, 1854-55, Krishna says that the topmost Jnana Yogi, one who sees everything equally and one who sees everything equally, that person then attains devotion to me. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochiti na kamshati samaha sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim navate param. So, now to summarize it another way, we could say that. So, this is the technically the flow of the Gita. But in one sense, the Gita goes like this and it concludes in Bhakti Yoga. And so it is 1866, for example, is Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam. Put aside all things and just surrender to me. Now, when Srila Prabhupada is giving this commentary, there is one academic scholar, he said that this Swami, his audacity is outrageous. He says, Krishna, for example, 6th chapter says, go to the forest. And he says in his commentary, actually you should not go to the forest. That's not practical. Just chant Hare Krishna. He says he's cancelling Krishna's words. He's cancelling the Bhagavad Gita. And on top of that, he says this is Bhagavad Gita as it is. What outrageousness! Now, is Prabhupada cancelling Krishna's words? Actually, if you want to talk about cancelling, in one sense, Krishna himself is cancelling his own words. 1866, what happens is, Krishna says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam. Just put aside all varieties of dharma and just surrender to me. That means all that I have told you till now. Put it aside and just mamekam sharanam. Practice one thing. Now, why does Krishna say something like that? And how is that related to our discussion? Let's zoom in on the conclusion. Say, let's 1863 and 1866. Now, at one point, in one sense, 1863 is the end of the Bhagavad Gita. At this point, Krishna says, Vimrishaitat asheshena yathechchitta kuru. That I have spoken now, you deliberate and you do as you desire. In one sense, this is how Krishna is showing his respect for human intelligence and human independence. Every individual is independent, and Krishna throughout the Gita is appealing to Arjuna. One of my friends wanted to write said, I want to write a contemporary analysis of the Bhagavad Gita. He said, I want to write the 10 commandments of the Bhagavad Gita. So I said, please don't write a book like that. Because the Bhagavad Gita's mood is not of commandments at all. It is of choices and consequences. You choose this, this will happen. You choose this will happen. So at this point, Krishna has in one sense completed the Gita. And when Arjuna hears this, deliberate and do as you desire. So Arjuna starts thinking, okay, Krishna said that in the 6th chapter, Krishna said that in the 8th chapter. Now, of course, Arjuna is not thinking in terms of chapters, because it's a natural flow of the Gita. Krishna doesn't say now. Now I completed 5th chapter, now I'm starting the 6th chapter. No, that is a little structural addition. But Krishna is thinking, Arjuna is still thinking, oh, there Krishna spoke that, and there Krishna spoke that, and there Krishna spoke that. So, now Krishna is leaving the onus to Arjuna. Do as you desire. But Arjuna is thinking, what does Krishna desire? What does Krishna desire that I do? And that he's trying to figure out. Sometimes when two people are very close to each other, then just by a glance, they can speak volumes. One glance at the other person and they say, okay, that's what it is, okay, yeah. But sometimes when two people don't get along with each other, even screams can't communicate. So when Krishna is glancing at Arjuna, and Arjuna is looking at Krishna, Arjuna is thinking, what does Krishna want me to do? Now Krishna has said that do as you desire. And that is nice, that Krishna is respecting Arjuna's independence. But Arjuna wants to please Krishna. Therefore Arjuna is wanting to know, what does Krishna want me to do? It's like, if some guest is coming to our house and we ask them, what would you like to have for lunch? And they say, whatever you make, that's fine. Yeah, but what do you like? No, whatever you make is fine. No, but we would like to know what you would like. If you want to please the other person, and the other person is giving us freedom, whatever you make, that's fine. That is maybe their expression of their magnanimity, they are not wanting to inconvenience us. But if we want to please them, then we would like to know. When there is a loving relationship, what would you like to have? So like that, Arjuna wants to know, what does Krishna want to do? Therefore, when Krishna sees this desire of Arjuna, then Krishna says, in 1864 he says, now sarva guhyatamam bhuyaha shuru me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dudamiti tato bhaksham te tam. This 64th verse is probably the most love-filled verse of the Bhagavad Gita. There are 5 intensifiers in this verse. Sarva guhyatamam, the most confidential knowledge. Krishna is saying, what I have spoken, many things I have spoken, but it is the most confidential. Then again he is saying, I am most confidential, again, bhuyaha, I am speaking it. And then, not only that, that means, if there's something very important we want to convey to the other person, we might remind them again, please get this, please do that, remember this. So again, and then paramam vachaha, supreme words. So there are multiple intensifiers in these words. And then after that he says, Ishtosime Dudamiti. He says, you are dearly loved by me. Ishtosime Dudamiti. You're not just loved by me, but you are dearly loved by me. Some Gita commentators say that this Dudha means that determined. So what it means is Krishna says, I am determined to love you. That whether we may turn toward Krishna, we may turn away from Krishna, but Krishna says, he is determined to love us. Once I gave a class, the topic was, God does not believe in atheists. So, atheists will say, I don't believe in God. But God says, okay, your atheism is something superficial. You are still my soul, you are still my precious part. I love you. So God does not believe in the atheism of atheists. He sees beyond that. Krishna says, I am determined to love you. And then, last is, for your benefit I will speak this. So, this indicates that Krishna is opening his heart. So, just to take another metaphor to understand this, suppose somebody has got some serious disease like cancer, and then they go to a competent doctor, maybe an excellent doctor, excellent physician, and the physician outlines these options. Okay, you can take these pills, you can do this chemotherapy, you can do this radiotherapy, you can do this, and if you do these are the costs, these are the potential side effects, this is the path of recovery. And the doctor gives an analysis. And now you can decide what you want. So now if there's a doctor and the patient, they have a close relationship. The patient may ask, what would you recommend? If your child or a loved one, your loved one, were in my condition, what would you do? Now, at this point, the discussion then has gone beyond just a doctor-patient interaction. It's become much more personal. So till that time, the doctor is being more like a dispassionate educator. Dispassionate educator. Okay, do this is the cost-benefit analysis. You do this will happen. You do this will happen, this will happen. So Krishna here is like a dispassionate educator. So, now you deliberate and do as you desire. So, like that, doctor says, okay, you do this, you have this, you have all these options. So, Krishna is the dispassionate educator. But then, when Arjuna is eager to know what Krishna wants to say, at that point, actually from this verse to this verse, Krishna reveals himself as an impassioned lover. He's not just an educator. He has given education, but when Arjuna wants to know what Krishna wants him to do, Krishna says, now I will reveal to you the most confidential knowledge. And then in the 65th verse, Krishna, he says, I want to tell you again, Bhuyaha. So he says again. Then he speaks, Manmana Bhavamad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. Mam Evaishyasi Satyante Pratijane Priyosi. Become my devotee, essentially he says. Devote yourself to me. So now this 1865 is actually very similar to 934. And yet there is a very significant difference. So, there Krishna is saying, you do this, do this, do this, do this. In this way, if you dedicate yourself to me, you will come to me. Whereas here, Krishna is saying, if you do this, I guarantee you will come to me. So in one sense, if you consider, 934 and 1865, they are similar. So, but 934, the focus is on Arjuna's actions. If you do this, you will come to. Focus is on Arjuna's actions. But in 1865, the focus is on Krishna's actions. That means Krishna is here saying, Manmana bhav mad bhakto madhyaji mame vaishyasi satyam te pratyane priyosi. This is the truth that I speak. You will surely come to me. So what is the significance of this difference? Suppose somebody wants to sell a house. And then there's some customer who has come, but they're not very sure about the credentials of the customer. Now, this person really serious about buying. If you do this, in this way, if you complete all the legalities, then the house will be yours. That's initial. That's initial, the seller's position. But suppose the seller is desperate to sell the house, he desperately needs some money. The same seller may say, if you just do this, I guarantee you, the deed will be yours within 1 day. So the second level, what is happening is that the seller is very eager to sell the deed. So like that, in 934, Krishna is emphasizing what Arjuna should do. But by 1865, Krishna's heart is overflowing with compassion. If you just do this, I guarantee you will come to me. And after this, then is the most categorical verse. But what about Krishna? Arjuna may think, Krishna has told me so many different things. Let's just forget it. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Just surrender to me. And even if there are any complications, aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. He says that just do my will. I will protect you, Krishna says. Now, what does this particular verse mean? That, suppose, say, there's a young military officer, and that person has two authorities, maybe under one lieutenant here, another lieutenant there, another colonel here, another colonel there. And he says, you have to do this and you have to do that. And then that person contacts the commander of the army. And the commander says, just do this. He says, no, but if I do this, that colonel will be unhappy, that colonel will be unhappy. He says, don't worry, I'll take care of everything. You just do what it is. So here, Krishna is revealing his heart. And Krishna is giving a categorical conclusion that just surrender to him. Just practice bhakti. So, now this is the conclusion. That's why the Gita is inclusive, but also it is conclusive. Very categorically it's conclusive. There cannot be a more clear emphasis than the Sarvadharman Parityajya. I've analyzed many things, just like a doctor may give various analysis. Okay, good, this treatment. Fine. If you try my child, this is what I will do. And then this is what I recommend you to. So like that, Krishna is giving his personal recommendation at the end of the Gita. So now, when Srila Prabhupada is giving us commentary, now Krishna at that point may be analyzing Karma Yoga, he may be analyzing Dhyan Yoga, he may be analyzing Jnana Yoga. Krishna analyzes these things, but as I said, he doesn't just analyze these things specifically. He analyzes them, so all point to Bhakti. But at the end, it comes to Bhakti Yoga. But what Prabhupada's purports do is, he reflects the concluding mood of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And whatever Krishna has given at the end, Prabhupada gives throughout the commentary. So, throughout he is giving what Krishna has given at the conclusion. And why does he do this? It is not to cancel Krishna's words. If Prabhupada's purpose had been to cancel Krishna's words, you consider Srila Prabhupada's Gita, if you wanted to cancel Krishna's words, then Prabhupada could have just hidden Krishna's words. Isn't it? Prabhupada could just have given his translation and commentary. But Prabhupada is not doing this in fact. Why? Because Prabhupada is giving the Sanskrit, Prabhupada is giving the transliteration, Prabhupada is giving the word-to-word translation, the synonyms. So Prabhupada is letting people see. In the verse Krishna is saying Karma Yoga. And Prabhupada is talking about Bhakti Yoga. So that will raise questions. What is going on? Now if you look at Prabhupada's purpose carefully, especially at the start of a chapter or at the end of a chapter, Prabhupada is aware of the technical flow of the Gita. For example, the last verse of the second chapter, 2.72, that purport, Prabhupada says, in this chapter, Karma Yoga has been talked about and Bhakti Yoga has been hinted at. But Prabhupada in his purport is not even a hint of Bhakti Yoga. Prabhupada is given a full description of Bhakti Yoga. He is talking about how, say, King Parikshit and Ambarish Maharaj is worshipping Krishna with the entire being. So this is, Prabhupada is actually, he's not cancelling, he is actually emphasizing conclusion throughout. The idea is that, how is Prabhupada's Bhagavad as it is? Because it is making sure that the conclusion is what is emphasized throughout. Many people may get caught in the technicality of the Gita and they may take one part of the Gita and they may stop with that. They may either get lost or they may take one part and they may stop with that. But Prabhupada makes sure that even if anybody reads one page of the Gita, they will get the conclusion. Now, Prabhupada himself said one time when he was asked which books he wanted to publish in the future, he said that I would like to publish the Bhagavad Gita. So he already written this. Yes. There's so much more that he written in the Bhagavad Gita. He write another commentary. So Prabhupada's commentary is Prabhupada himself, and Prabhupada is not hiding anything, right? In his introduction also he says very clearly that our purpose in writing this commentary is the same as the purpose which Krishna decided to us. So the Gita is quite conclusive. It is concluding in Bhakti Yoga, and Krishna emphasizes that very categorically again after having developed that flow of our systematically. And Prabhupada gives that conclusion consistently. So, at one level, Krishna accepts everyone. Wherever you are, whatever the motivation is, just come to me. I will eliminate you. So it's you will come to me. That is the conclusive part. Please come to me. The way I like to phrase it is from your place. So this is my rephrasing of one of the verses of the Gita is 4.11. All people are on my path. From your place, at your pace. Access Krishna's grace. So, from your place, at your pace, access Krishna's grace. So this part of from your place, at your pace, this is the inclusive part. And access Krishna's grace, access Krishna's grace, that is the conclusive part. So it is Krishna's grace is to be accessed. It is that we harmonize with Krishna's grace. Mam ekam sharanam vraja. So the Bhagavad Gita is thus both inclusive and conclusive. I'll summarize and we can have a few questions. So I started by talking about how the Gita and the ladder of abstraction. So at a contextual level, there are many details, and at a universal level, there are principles. So most of the Gita is at this level, very little at this level. Krishna's purpose is not to get Arjuna to fight, it is to give him universal principles for living and for receiving. Now, from that perspective, we discuss how Krishna is hitting the same target from multiple directions. Through various paths, Krishna is enjoining Arjuna to fight. Whether it is Karma Kand, Karma Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. So Krishna talks about how Arjuna should play his part in the divine plan. And then he discusses the flow of the Gita, how it is first 6 chapters Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga to Jnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and then it's Jnana Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. So there is a flow and there is a conclusion. So now, then we discuss especially how this conclusion is so emphatic, 1864 to 66, 63 to 66, how Krishna's mood changes from that of a dispassionate educator to an impassioned lover. And it is that mood that Srila Prabhupada embodies in his commentary. So what Krishna gives at the conclusion of the Gita, Srila Prabhupada gives that same, Prabhupada points to that throughout the Gita. So that same conclusion Prabhupada is giving throughout the Gita. And so the Gita is both inclusive in the sense that different people from different levels are accommodated within its worldview. At the same time, it is also conclusive. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, please.
You would delineate what's real renunciation and what's not.
Artificial false renunciation. False renunciation?
Yeah, those different kinds of renunciation. And you said that Bhakti Yoga was not the real renunciation, but let me see. Detached work was Bhakti Yoga. Right?
Both Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah, so I was expecting you to say that it is Bhakti Yoga that's real renunciation, because we often hear, right?
In the context of the Bhagavad Gita, renunciation is used not in the context of an inner disposition of renunciation. There, when real renunciation means one is actually giving up one's duty. So, yes, in the paths of Dhyana Yoga and Jnana Yoga, people do renounce the world and go out to the forest. But Krishna is not recommending that way of practicing Bhakti. So, in Arjuna's context, renounce means give up his duty. Work means do his duty. So, Bhakti Yoga involves real inner renunciation. But that does not necessarily mean a Bhakti Yoga has to renounce the world externally. So these two are options, possibilities for those who are contemplating external renunciation. So external renunciation can be done with actual detachment or with concealed attachment. So it's false renunciation versus real renunciation. Okay. Yes, please.
What is the definition of Krishna's grace that comes up in the form of like the Christianity concept of God's grace?
Okay, what is the definition of Krishna's grace? How is that different from the Christian concept of grace? Well, the idea of kripa, mercy, is very much integral to the Bhakti tradition. And at one level, Bhakti underlies and unifies the various religious traditions in the world, especially theistic traditions. Prabhupada would say Jesus is our Guru. When people ask him what do you think about Jesus, he says he has so much love for God that he was ready to give up his life for the sake of God. Anybody with such love of God is our Guru. So in that sense, the idea of grace, the idea of love of God and the grace of God, they're similar. But within Christianity, the idea of grace has become, in one sense, narrowed down to the person of Jesus. That means the idea is that God's grace comes through that one channel only. And only one who accepts Jesus as a Savior only those people will be saved. In the Bhagavad Gita's teachings, Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. Krishna comes again and again and again. His love for us is unlimited, and that's why he keeps descending or sending his messengers, representatives again and again. So the principle of grace is similar, but the idea that grace is to be limited to only one channel, that is not there in the Bhakti tradition. And the second is that grace does not mean that that it frees us from our responsibility. Now, that's not what all Christians say, but for many Christians, Christianity is a very, very broad thing, so I'm not generalizing, I'm not absolutizing, but I can make a general thing. But many Christians, they think that because Jesus has died for our sins, so whatever we do now, we will be saved. But no, in the Bhakti tradition, yes, God's mercy comes to us, but that has to be reflected in the redirection of our heart towards God. So we need to be able to consciously direct our heart and our love towards Krishna. That sadhana within Christianity, the systematic disciplined practice, that is often de-emphasized because they say God's grace will do everything. No, we do sadhana to attract that grace, but our sadhana is also important. Although it is the grace that is ultimately transformative, but our sadhana is also important. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful session. So you mentioned that Prabhupada reflects the conclusion of the Gita throughout his translation of the Gita. Now, agreed that it brings a reader, directly to the conclusion of the Gita and puts that reader on the path of Bhakti Yoga. But there is also a group of people who might be put off by that kind of a thing. So I just wanted to understand the reasoning behind Prabhupada doing that. I understand the reason in the sense of he wants to reflect the conclusion, but why did he want to? If he would have said something like you mentioned the last purport of second chapter where Prabhupada is writing that he's aware of the flow here, but still he's emphasizing on Bhakti Yoga there. So what if he would have clarified something like Krishna is talking about Karma Yoga here, but because the conclusion is Bhakti Yoga, that is why Bhakti Yoga should be extracted from this. So that would have been that wouldn't have put off certain people.
Yeah, see, there is. Thank you for the question. The Prabhupada's books are both timeless and timely. He's giving a universal message. At the same time, that message is spoken to a particular audience. And if you consider the audience that Prabhupada was speaking to, it was leave alone like pure devotional consciousness involving analysis of various yogic paths. There was a very basic level of spiritual search might have been there, but apart from that, the confusion was very high, and Prabhupada was speaking to Prabhupada speaks almost every purport as if he's speaking it to a person who is needy. That's his compassion. And Prabhupada also wanted us to study his books and present his books. Prabhupada also said that the serious students should study the Priyacharya's commentaries. So Prabhupada was speaking to a particular context. And in general, Prabhupada's commentaries focus on the essential conclusions. Prabhupada does not get too caught in technical deliberations too much. So that every teacher has their own emphasis, their own style, and that reflects their mood. So Prabhupada focuses on essential conclusions. And technical analysis, he leaves it to others. Yes.
Thank you for this talk. It was very helpful. Another question I had was, what's the difference between Dhyan Yoga and Jnana Yoga and the results of all the paths? Can you just go into that once more?
Between Jnana Yoga and?
Jnana Yoga and Dhyan Yoga?
Jnana and Dhyan.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in the Bhagavad Gita, So Jnana Yoga and Dhyana Yoga are broadly the paths of renunciation. But to come to that level of renunciation takes time. So these two are renounced paths, so Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. But because it takes time to come to those levels, so there is a pre-renounced practice. Say for example, the Advaita Vedanta path, Vedantic path. Your spiritual life begins after you take sannyas. If you're not taking sannyas, then you are doing like a practicer. So the net practice is also important. How well a player will perform in the actual match will depend on how well they have practiced. But in those paths, everything before that is like a net practice. So, in one sense, Krishna tells Arjuna that even if you think you are renounced enough to actually renounce the world and follow your Dhyana Yoga or Jnana Yoga, but you need to set an example for society. And therefore, you practice at the pre-renounced level. That is the contextual application of Gita. Krishna says, in this way also you will do, if you do your duty, you will be contributing to society, and by acting at this level, you will also raise your consciousness. And eventually, you will come to the path of, you will be able to practice the path of renunciation, if you want to practice that. Now, what is the destination after that? It depends. See, at one level, the absolute truth is one. There is one absolute truth. This is from the one perspective. But another perspective, depending on how well the absolute truth has been realized, the absolute truth has three features: Sat, Chit, and Anand. It's eternal, cognizant, and joyful. So when only the Sat feature of the absolute is realized, that is called as Brahman. So now Brahman is non-different from Krishna. But if only one feature of the absolute is realized, that is called as Brahman. So like that, say suppose, give an example. Suppose right behind us is a kitchen, and there's some delicious food is going to cook. Say gulab jamun or pakoda da bhi. So now gulab jamun is being cooked, and then we get the fragrance over it. Oh, this is so attractive. And we go to the kitchen and then see what it is. Okay, this looks so attractive. This is sauce, so nice, spherical. And then we eat it. It's delicious. So now it is the same gulab jamun which initially is experienced at the level of fragrance. Then it is experienced at the level of fragrance and sight. Then it is experienced at the level of fragrance, sight, and taste. So like that, it is the same one absolute truth. But that one absolute truth, when it is experienced at the level of Sat, that is called as Brahman. So suppose somebody, their whole life, their only experience was, maybe they were living in a house which is, maybe they're living in a prison or something like that, other side there's a gulab jamun shop, and all that they get is to experience the gulab jamun's fragrance. And based on that fragrance, they come up with a name to their object. Now they are naming the actual gulab jamun only, but they are experiencing one aspect of it. So like that, Brahman is a term used to refer to the absolute truth when only the eternally existent aspect of the absolute truth is talked about. And this is the aspect that is realized by Jnana Yoga. Now, when these two aspects are both realized, it is called as Paramatma. That means the ultimate truth is not just eternally existing, but it's a conscious being. And this is the destination of Dhyana Yoga. Now when all three are realized, that the absolute truth is not just eternally existing, not just cognizant, but it's a reservoir of happiness. That we can reciprocate love and delight in a personal relationship. That is Bhakti Yoga. Sorry, that is Bhagavan. And this aspect of Bhagavan is realized through Bhakti Yoga. Or this realization of the absolute truth comes through Bhakti Yoga. So, by the practice of Jnana Yoga, one comes close to the Brahman level. Realizes the Brahman, can enter into the Brahman. By the practice of Jnana Yoga, one realizes the Paramatma. Now, whether they will go to a higher realization or not, that depends on whether they get the association of some devotees who are attracted toward Bhagavan and can direct them to Bhagavan. But even both these realizations are also, so all three levels of knowledge of the absolute truth, in one sense, they are all these three are, they are in one sense liberation. Because one is going beyond this world. So all three are auspicious. That's why Kalyana Kuru Krishna says. Anybody who is pursuing this path is doing the auspicious work. Of course, the most auspicious work is to know the absolute truth, its full manifestations, and realize that. So, okay. Yes, the last question. Yeah.
So one question I have is like sometimes when people read the Bhagavad Gita, I heard someone make a comment, why does Krishna seem so eager to be worshipped? It almost seems a bit narcissistic. So how do you respond to that?
That Krishna seems extremely narcissistic.
It seems very
Actually, it is Krishna is remarkably restrained. It's the exact opposite. I'll explain how. That if you consider the chapters when Krishna is not talking about Bhakti Yoga. When Krishna is talking about Karma Yoga, even when he refers to God, he refers to God in the third person. Why? Because Krishna's focus is not that I be worshipped, but it is you be elevated. And like somebody, like some people, they are very proud of their degree. You know, somebody's maybe I'm a cardiac, I'm an award-winning heart surgeon. They come to a party, they say, you know, I'm a heart surgeon, I won that award. I'm a heart surgeon, I won that award. They're constantly bragging like that. But if you see, in the Karma Yoga section, chapters 1 to 6, Krishna, even when he refers to God, he refers to him in the third person. The Karma Yogis, they should worship that Supreme Lord as an object of, not necessarily their ultimate conclusion, but as a tool for their evolution. And there are very few, in this section, there's 261 with 330, then 435, 529. There are very, very few references, less than a dozen references in the entire first 6 chapters. Similarly, in the 13 to 18, there are very few references. So, probably 13, 18, 14, 27, and then 60 chapters is practically no reference, 70 chapters is no reference. There are few references. The point I'm making is, when Krishna is not teaching Bhakti Yoga, he does not refer to himself in the first person at all. Even when he's referring to divinity, he's referring to the third person. But when he's talking about Bhakti Yoga is not just a dispassionate process, okay, you follow this. The whole principle of Bhakti is that God is so attractive, that's why I should love him. So it's like, suppose there's a patient is sick and there's a doctor out there on the scene, and doctor says, the other relatives, other people think, maybe we should take him to the doctor, maybe this person get recovered, let him say as it is. The doctor will say, no, you need to take him to a doctor. But if that patient is having a heart attack and this person is himself, say, a heart specialist, say, I'm a doctor, I can treat it. I can save this life. So when Krishna is teaching about Bhakti Yoga, that is when Krishna emphasizes about himself. Between chapter 7 to 12, that is where he's referring to himself. Why? Because without talking about his glory, both his greatness and his sweetness, devotion cannot be inspired. So Krishna's message is very purpose driven. And where the purpose is Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, to teach that, analyze that, he's very restrained in mentioning himself. When he mentions himself, he mentions in the third person. But when he is talking about Bhakti Yoga, that's when he mentions himself in the first person and he emphasizes his greatness and sweetness so that devotion can be inspired. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Gaur Bhaktavind.